Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by my co-hosts plus a guest. Welcome back to the show, friend of the show, Mark Bramhill.
Hi, good to be here.
Mark is a radio producer and podcaster. We've had him on the show to talk about the Apple. This week's episode is about the Apple Design Awards, Apple Design Awards 2018. We've had Mark on the show to talk about Apple Design Awards before, so thank you for coming back on the show. Mark has a terrific podcast called Welcome to Macintosh that we're all big fans of. You may also have heard him on, his work has been on other shows as well, like 99% Invisible. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark.
Yeah.
I am also joined by my co-hosts, Laura Nash. How are you doing, Laura?
I'm doing excellent.
And my bro-host, Shane Kelly. How are you doing, Shane?
No complaints. It's been a beautiful Sunday.
Yeah. And we're recording this not long after the conclusion of WWDC 2018. So if you've been listening to the show for a while, you're probably already familiar with the Apple Design Awards, or if you're an Apple nerd or an iOS gamer, you may be familiar with them as well. But we are talking about the Apple Design Awards for this year, which were awarded at this year's WWDC.
We should say that is the Worldwide Developers Conference for Macintosh.
The Apple Design Awards is basically Apple's chance to say, hi, look at these people who did great games that use the shiny new tech that we have this year, or some other reason why they really want to say, you know, other developers be like these people. It's not necessarily the best games of this year. Usually they're pretty, but often there's something going on beneath the hood that showcases a technology, a platform, a style, control, something Apple wants to say, you know, emulate this. Guys, keep doing this kind of thing. We've done them since 2014.
Apple is also a company with a huge kind of investment in just sort of design in general. And so they tend to choose games that have and it is a design award. It's not a game design award. It's just a app design award. There are the majority of the things that win, the apps that win, are not games. They are productivity apps or tools for mobile devices and things like that. And so this games category is really there, I think, to just, as you say, Laura, to highlight games that are making use of some of the cutting edge technology that Apple has, but also examples of really good design and really good accessible design that the general developer community would celebrate and that the Apple community will celebrate.
Yeah, minimally, it has to be polished. Like, they might not have anything else in common, but I mentioned it's not the best game. Often the best games can be very experimental and weird, and they might have little hiccups. These are going to be smooth experiences. Whether or not you enjoy them is up to taste, but they will be very well put together under the hood and on the surface as well.
The kind of games that might make a businessman working at Apple say, that's a good game.
I mean, they're often the showstopper games, too. Like, they're the ones that when you go to the Apple store, they're on the phone so that you can play with them. And you're like, yes. Like, this looks good. I should buy this device.
Exactly.
That is the kind of thing Apple's going for.
So before we dive into talking about the specific games, and we're probably not going to talk about the non-game winners of the Apple Design Awards, mostly, I mean, they're kind of interesting. One of the things that won this year is an app that lets you take a photo of surgical sponges in an operating room and will estimate for you the volume of blood loss of the patient. So interesting stuff like that, but stuff that probably isn't that interesting from a video game perspective. Although
it's
maybe
actually super interesting. How do they do that?
With machine learning, of course. But we're not probably going to be talking about the non-game winners this year. We're just going to stick to talking about the games. Before we do dive into talking about those games, let's talk a little bit about just what our impressions were from this year's WWDC. Mark, obviously you're a close observer of Apple. What stood out to you about WWDC this year?
I thought it was a pretty good WWDC, pretty good year for announcements. It was something where there hadn't been a ton of major leaks, and it seemed like it might be kind of a boring year for new features, but there was a decent amount of new stuff. A lot of polish and fit and finish, I think, for than the iPhone. I especially like the changes for notifications, do not disturb, and the time tracking stuff that it has. I thought that was really impressive. I thought that was something that's sorely needed. Having the ability to say like, get a notification from an app that sends you spammy notifications, and right from within that be able to turn all of them off, or be able to have them group on your lock screen so it's less overwhelming, smarter, and more aggressive do not disturb stuff. Things like that seem really nice. Things like that I've wanted for a while.
Absolutely.
As someone who's been in not 100 hours of meetings about notifications, but probably close to it for my job, I can tell you that everybody's lost, even if you know exactly what you're doing. Making sure that you can have the option to turn off a lot of different kind of notifications. People don't really, from the developer side, you didn't have the granular control to help have people get what they want when they want it. It's kind of fire hose or nothing, or do the horrible LinkedIn approach where you ask someone to make 60 decisions right off the bat. So I'm super excited about the notifications from a design standpoint, because you can have more options without Apple's controlling it, and the individual apps don't have to make quite as many decisions. And I hopefully won't have to do quite as many meetings where I try to tell people you can't spam people all the time.
It's also something where I don't know, I didn't get this as much from the keynote, but seeing some people have installed the beta and been testing it. If you have like a calendar event or something, it might notice like, oh, this, this meeting seems important. Like it automatically, I've turned on do not disturb, so not to bother you during this thing or whatever, and trying to be intelligent and a little more aggressive at like, maybe you shouldn't be checking your phone constantly right now.
Awesome.
And so things
Brunch
like that
looks
seem
important. Brunch with mom seems like something your phone shouldn't be on for, that kind of thing.
Yeah, which is like maybe true. And so that's I think it's something where it's like encouraging you to spend more time away from your device or pick it up fewer times during the day. I think is like definitely good for everybody. And along with like notifications and changes like that, then I think it allows it to be less overwhelming and it demands less of your attention, and can be smarter about when it is trying to get you to look at it.
I think the other sort of non-game related thing that they showed off that I'm most excited about is sort of the triumphant return of workflow as in the new form of the Shortcuts app. Like,
oh yeah,
I really cannot wait to play around with this, and I hope that it's retained at least most of the sort of power of the original workflow app.
You're going to have to explain it, because 99% of people are not quite as into Mac productivity as we might be.
So Workflow was an app that I think it's won a design award in the past, so we may have mentioned it. It was an app that would let you create sort of shortcut workflows on your phone by kind of using these little Tinker Toy assembly line steps. You could build a little workflow to do something that you frequently or need to do often on your phone, and it was really clever. It worked within the restrictions of iOS, but it gave you a lot of power. So you could create a little workflow to, for example, you go from the share sheet on a web page and automatically filter the web page for a certain type of content, and then strip out an image and then upload it to Dropbox or something like that. And then you could do that all automatically without having to do a bunch of individual steps. And it sped up a lot of things I did pretty frequently on my phone. Then it got bought by Apple, and it didn't get completely abandoned, but it sat without a lot of significant updates for well over a year now. I think a couple of years.
Given the general kind of results when Apple buys a product or a company with a product that I like, I was shocked that Workflow continued to see updates at all. And it was very, very encouraging to me. And so it wasn't that huge of a surprise when I saw it appear as an OS level feature virtually unchanged as far as I could tell.
This is, I think, the best possible outcome for that, because first of all, tying it in with Siri, something that they couldn't have done on their own, but it makes absolutely perfect sense. If you build a useful little shortcut that does something useful on your phone, being able to trigger it from Siri is huge. And it also bridges a lot of the gap between, Siri is way behind being able to build so if there's some little pain point for you where Siri doesn't do some useful thing you wish it did, this will hopefully make that possible without needing to be something like incredibly pervasive that gets rolled out to everybody. I want a Siri shortcut that logs something to a spreadsheet on my phone or something. They're never going to build in Siri spreadsheet integration, but I could build my own custom one using this shortcut. So really, really excited about trying that. I hope it retains most of the really more advanced stuff from the workflow feature, but from the screenshots I've seen, I don't have the beta or anything yet, but from the screenshots I've seen, they at least have sections in the app for things like the scripting shortcuts. So I think it's retained most of the useful stuff.
Mark, are you and Siri cool?
I definitely could be a lot bigger of a fan of Siri. I think it has a lot of problems. But I'm definitely excited by this feature. I think this is something that can actually give it more extensibility and more usefulness to me, where the big thing it's going to come down to is just like there's a lot of ways where just Siri falls down at like trying to interpret what you say. The fact that I can just give it like this set of words, do this thing, I think that will probably make me less frustrated by it, because it's pretty good at understanding the words that I've said, but it's usually very bad at knowing what to do with those.
Yeah.
So that's something where I could definitely see this being more useful than some things that Siri does, and more useful than workflow was for me, where it was something which seemed really cool, but always a little too fiddly for me to use it for anything that I use day to day. Where it's like I could see the power in it, but it ultimately came down to I would rather just open this and do this on my Mac. It was usually what it would come down to. Rather than build the whole system for doing it myself, basically, with this weird Rube Goldberg machine. But the fact that this can do lots of things, like you could set up a command to do something with all of your smart things. Like, that's really cool. And definitely something that I think people would want to be able to do, and makes it actually pretty intuitive and, like, accessible to do. Where it's not like, oh, I need to go like run this weird script thing. It's like you just talk at your phone, and that feels a lot more natural than using the original workflow app. So I think that could make a lot of these things much more broadly accessible in a way that workflow was never going to be.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's something I can definitely see, like going to my mom's house and just coding this stuff for her in like one afternoon, and then being like, just ask Siri these words and their phone will do what you're supposed to. Like, tech support for parents, I feel like, is what Siri is for, and it does not do it well at all right now.
No.
So, like, that's my secret dream, is that I can just make some scripts that does the things the phone is supposed to do for my mom, and then the phone will magically do them for her, and I won't have to do them remotely over Skype.
So you're going to make a Siri trigger that says, call Laura. And so when she says, hey, Siri, call Laura, it's going to actually run through like a script of questions like, have you tried turning it off and on again?
Are you sure you want to call Laura? Is it an emergency?
She seems busy.
The only things that really seem gaming related from this year's WWDC, there were a couple of things that sort of struck me as like, important game related news from WWDC. One was the improved AR kit. AR kit is getting better really, really fast. And it's interesting because it's this thing that's constantly in the Apple news, and yet I never actually see it in apps yet. Like, there's not that much actual, popular, useful apps using AR kit out there right now. And yet Apple is clearly putting a lot of work into it. I was expecting this year's Apple Design Award games to be full of AR kit.
If they had found one that fit their level of polish, it would have won. But I think they haven't had any game that's been good enough for their standards yet.
Well, that is why I was very, very much expecting. There's a game called Euclidean Lands, and it's by that same developer that did Frost that won this year. This Kunabi brother, and they're already a winner in a past year for I want to say Bleck was the name of the game where you were, and so and they even had they've had other games that were I think in the App Store that were featured or something, things like that. But I was really expecting that game to win this year. It feels kind of like a cross between Hitman Go and a Rubik's Cube, if that makes sense. Like
it doesn't.
Or
Go ahead.
Hitman, those Go games where you're moving your character around on a grid, and trying to accomplish some sort of goal. It's that, except crossed with maybe what's the very popular iOS game where you're
Monument Valley?
That's the one.
The very
popular
iOS
iOS game. So it's Monument Valley in 3D on a 3D object that you can move
with ARKit
in AR. And given how much in the past this set of awards has been used as a showcase for the latest technology, and ARKit is that latest technology, I was very much expecting something to win, and that was my pick. But there's not a single ARKit game on our list this year, which I think is really weird.
Yeah, maybe it's too close to Monument Valley for their taste.
At WWDC, they pretty much went up on stage and said, hey, we made an ARKit game, and we're giving everybody the code to it. And it almost sort of felt like, see, devs, this is how you do it. Come on, build some ARKit games.
Yeah.
Please, for the love of God, build some ARKit games.
They did have the people from Lego come up and be very Danish on stage and play with some virtual minifigs.
That demo went on for
very strange,
too long.
It was at a perfect time. It was where I had some car trouble and it needed to be towed back to the shop. And the tow truck came right during that segment, and I didn't miss a thing.
And I changed my laundry, and I came back, and they were still demoing Lego. So
yep, it's great. You don't actually have to build anything anymore. Now you just have to stare at your phone.
Yeah, I gotta say that I certainly understand the appeal of like, wow, my toy came to life, and that's cool, right? But the way that that's implemented with that Lego thing, I just gotta think like, so I've built this incredibly intricate, very cool looking Lego thing. Now I'm going to point my camera at it and pretend it's not there and play this game that's sort of vaguely related to it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird.
Someone's going to use ARKit in an escape the room game, and it's going to blow people's minds, and it's going to make $1 million.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good point. That'd be a good use for it.
The thing for the Legos for me is it definitely felt very much just like, you've built this great Lego set. Now, point the thing and it'll visualize another Lego set that your kid will now really want you to go buy.
Yeah, that too.
Ding, 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 ding.
Also, that Lego set that they had on stage, that's like a over $100 Lego set, no question.
Oh, yeah.
That's like I'm pretty sure I've seen that exact Lego set go for about $150.
All the things that they had on stage and then visualized are like well over $100.
Yeah. So you're going to need this $100 Lego set in order to play with a picture of this $100 Lego set on your phone. Great. Okay. So the other thing that came out of WWDC this year that I think is a little bit less encouraging news is that they are depreciating, which is the correct word. Deprecating. Thank you. They are deprecating OpenGL in macOS in favor of Metal. Now, this isn't a huge surprise. OpenGL. So I'm not a developer, so take this with a grain of salt. But so OpenGL is a graphics framework that is used. It's widely used, cross-platform, open source. It's basically software that lets your software that you build, or your game or whatever it is, interact with and get the best use out of your GPU, your graphics processor in your computer. And practically everything uses OpenGL in some way or other, but Apple had been neglecting their implementation of OpenGL on the Mac, and I think also on iOS, for years. And it's widely been considered that like one of the big things that's been holding gaming on the Mac back is the crummy implementation of OpenGL that makes it hard to port games from other systems, makes it hard to get good performance out of those games once they've been ported. And Apple's solution to that was, we aren't going to use OpenGL anymore. A few years ago, they said, hey, our OpenGL is kind of bad, but we now got this new thing called Metal. And Metal is this new Apple-only graphics framework that you can use across iPhones, iPads, Macs, etc. And it is, by all accounts, good. It's probably more modern than OpenGL, but it is Apple only. So now that they're officially sort of retiring OpenGL and encouraging all developers to move their work over to Macs, for some folks that won't make any difference. If they've already started moving to Metal for the performance increase, great. But if you're a developer today and you have a game on Windows, for example, or Linux, or on consoles, and you want to port it to the Mac, OpenGL would have been your sort of first and probably only bet for a graphics framework to do that. And now that's going away. So unfortunately, I think this probably means, I don't want to sound too doom and gloom, but I think this probably means that the trickle of video game ports to the Mac that we had already been getting is probably going to slow down to a drip. You're really probably going to see a lot fewer games being ported to the Mac if OpenGL is not available as an option, if they have to rewrite their graphics code entirely under Metal in order to get it to run at all.
Well, maybe it is a push to get the video game engine developers like, Unity and whatnot to build Metal support in at the
Unity already has.
I think, I was pretty sure Unity has. I don't know about all the major engines, but I feel like if those, I don't know enough about development to really understand all of the intricacies of these, but I think that if the engines that these are built on for ones that are using things like that, I think if those have good support for Metal, then that makes it possible to do the porting, but I honestly don't know the details of that.
Yeah, I just know that I've seen a lot of developers sort of wailing and gnashing their teeth about this, because a lot of them use Macs as their development platform, even if they're developing things that are targeting other systems like Windows or consoles, and this makes it a lot harder for them in that way. So I don't know. I'm not encouraged by this news. Hopefully it's like a third-party opportunity. Somebody's going to come in and have like a improved third-party OpenGL implementation for the Mac or something to act as some kind of in-between for this. But I really would have preferred to see Apple just spend the money to have a world-class OpenGL implementation on their platform, rather than just abandon it for years and years and then finally get rid of it without an open source cross-platform alternative.
If any devs are out there listening and are wailing and gnashing their teeth, if you want to come and wail and gnash your teeth on our show and tell us why we're wrong, we would love to hear it.
Yeah. The one thing that I could think of, though, that would be a difference where I think there may be fewer ports for the Mac from Windows or console games, but I definitely think with the various announcements at WWDC, we're going to see an increase of ports of games from iOS to the Mac. With
probably true.
Yeah, with both having using the same engine for using Metal on both the Mac and iPhone makes it a lot easier. But also then the new Marzipan was the code name for it, but the new cross-platform support.
Yeah, as far as I know, they didn't actually give it an official name yet. They're just sort of...
I don't think so.
Generally calling it like AppKit on Mac OS or something like that.
Yeah, or UI Kit.
Right.
I forget which one. I think AppKit's the one on Mac.
No, you're right. I mixed them up.
But yeah, I think a lot of what it is for the... It's something where there are a lot of hazy details. Really, it's like this is a very premature announcement. It's just something where it's a big enough change that developers would want to have a warning and letting people know, like, hey, this is something that you should have slated as like maybe this is what we're going to work on for that summer or whatever, or this point down the road. Having that announced, I think, is why they did it, just to be a little more. I think it's a good trend that they've been like more open about things with developers. I think they've maybe been like a little too much jumping the gun on announcing some consumer products like HomePod or
or the charger, the air power
charger.
thing. Yeah.
Air power, yeah.
It still
Doesn't exist.
Vapor power.
Yeah. So it's something like things like that. I think maybe need to go back to more of their roots of hold on to things until they're ready. But for things that involve developers and the community building things for their platforms, then I think it's really good to see them being a little more transparent about what they're doing and the timeline that these things are on.
And it is definitely good that they're announcing, hey, rather than just sort of not updating OpenGL, and saying, yeah, it's still there, you can use it, but you should really use Metal. Having like an actual official, like, this is something you should no longer be using if you can avoid it, because we're definitely actually not updating it. It's not that we haven't gotten around to it yet. It's not coming. It's just not going to happen. That's probably better than uncertainty, but it's still not great. It's still not great news. So it's something to keep in mind. If you are used to playing games on your Mac and you haven't already dual booted to Windows, get yourself a copy of Windows, because you'll have a lot more options and you'll get better performance. And eventually you'll probably be finding that some of the games you might want to play on your Mac might not be available on your Mac. So
and eventually you'll realize how great Windows is, and you'll just stop dual booting and stay right there on the Windows side.
That's
use an IE.
And that's not even IE anymore. What did they?
Yeah,
they
Edge.
Just called it
They renamed
Edge.
it
That's it. Yeah.
It's so edgy.
It is. Man, that's been super confusing. This is a total side note, but like that's been super confusing for me in my work, because I have to talk to people on Windows all day, and they're like, I'm like, internet. So open it in your web browser, and like, I can't find Internet Explorer. I'm like, it's been recently renamed to Edge. Do you still have an E somewhere? No, what is that? I've never heard of Edge. How did this get on my computer? Like, oh man, so many interesting conversations. So, moving on, games.
What a great transition. Games.
It is incredibly notable to me that we got about half an hour into the Apple Design Awards game podcast without mentioning the games, and it's because I was really mad when I saw the list this year. Not because the games didn't deserve it, but because I want an out of left field weird thing I've never seen before. I want my does not commute. I want my surprise game out of this year, and this year, no surprises.
Not
really
so much.
no surprises. Lots of repeat winners. Again, deserving winners, but there wasn't the like AR kit surprise out of a field. There wasn't a weird, quirky, polished, unknown developer that sprung up to light. We were kind of, I actually wrote 3 of these games as possibilities a week before they happened.
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of like to have been wrong.
Yeah, of the games on the list here, let's see. One.
Just name them.
Okay. So yeah, we'll go through the list. First winner is Florence. Actually, the first 3 games on the list are ones that we've previously covered on this show, so we won't be spending as much time talking about them as we did, obviously, on those dedicated episodes. There'll be links in the show notes if you want to check out our full episodes on Florence, Playdead's Inside, and Alto's Odyssey. All 3 of those won this year, as well as 2 others, Frost and Oddmar, which are newer, and we'll be talking about those probably in a little bit more detail. Do we want to just start by talking a little bit about Florence?
Yeah. I just played this. I'd had it downloaded for a while after hearing from y'all and some other friends. Like, everyone was talking about how good this was, and I knew it would be up my alley, but just actually hadn't gotten around to playing it until now. And for anyone who hasn't played this game, it's really short. Like, it took like 45 minutes or something to play through. But it's kind of like a sort of interactive graphic novel. There are like some very basic sort of puzzly bits, but it's following this girl, Florence, through her kind of struggling with being unsatisfied with her boring job and not in a great place in her life, through this new relationship, and her trying to get to like a better place and be like find more satisfaction in her life, basically. And it's really, really cutely done, really well done with music and animation, and these charming graphics. And yeah, it's just a very sweet sort of storytelling game. Did anything I missed there, or
No. It's also a Apple exclusive, which is, I think, why Apple probably chose to feature it here. It's one of the more high profile Apple exclusive iOS games that Apple likes to feature things that either are specifically exclusive to their platform or are doing something that is unique to their platform. And this is exclusive. It's also by designer Ken Wong, who did Monument Valley. And listeners of this show probably have heard of Monument Valley, and it's won Apple Design Awards in the past. So this is sort of a repeat winner. Even though it's a different
royalty there.
Yeah. It's a different development studio. This is from Mountains, which is Ken Wong's new dev studio after having left. I can't remember the name of the developer who did Monument Valley, but he left that group and sort of spun off on his own. And it's published by Annapurna Interactive, who's published a lot of really, really good stuff over the last year. They're sort of new as a publisher, but they seem to have great tastes in what they publish on iOS. Didn't they publish the new Reigns as well?
Annapurna? I don't know about that.
They did Gora Gora. They did What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they did Reigns. No, that wasn't them then. Sorry, misremembering. But anyway, they're great. They're definitely choosing interesting stuff. So Florence is a great game. We did a whole episode on it, episode 145. This is an ultra short game and easy to see why Apple would have picked it. I think it's beautiful. It's also, the soundtrack is probably the game soundtrack that I've listened to the most this year. I listen to a lot of game soundtracks. This one's on Spotify, which helps. So if you've got Spotify, it's on there. You can find it. And as a bit of a side note, something that I didn't know when we did the Florence episode, and this will be me like letting my my nerd show, but Kevin Penkin, the composer who did the soundtrack to this, also did the soundtrack to my favorite anime of last year, Made in Abyss. It's such a good anime, guys. Sorry, I just want to say that you should check out that show. It's really, really good, and the soundtrack to it is excellent as well.
Reagan uncharacteristically talked me into watching Made in Abyss, and as someone who watched one anime last year, it was my favorite anime of the year.
Good soundtrack, y'all. Anyway, Florence is awesome. I'm glad that it won, but it's also super not surprising, given that it is a previous winner's first game since his last winning game, and also a high-profile iOS exclusive short game.
Very unique. It mechanics-wise, very
gorgeous use of color, really great illustration.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a slam dunk. Again,
5 stars.
Completely deserving. Not surprising.
Yeah. It was the game that even though I hadn't played it, just from what I had seen of it, it was like the one thing where thinking about what games might win, it was like almost certainly that one. I don't know anything else. But that was my one sure pick.
Yeah. Same here. If that had been a pool or something, my money would have been on Florence. And I would have done okay. So the next game on the list is Playdead's Inside. If you listen to this show, you probably remember Inside. It was our game of the year of 2016 when it came out on Windows exclusively at that time. I mean, it first came out on Steam on Windows, and then later has come out across a number of other platforms. So you can play it on Xbox One and PS4. And at some point during the year this year, it came out on iOS and tvOS.
Yes, this is a game that won't just give you fun platforming experiences and scare you. It will mess you up for life with the violent death of a child protagonist every time you miss a jump, and with a horrifying ending that, even summarizing some of the non-spoiler elements, might disturb some of our younger listeners. So it was definitely a surprise pick for me, because although it is a work of undeniable technical expertise and it is a really fun game, and it is a really awesome iOS game. It's a port, and it is
It's a port of a 2-year-old game.
It's a port of a 2-year-old game, and it's kind of an adult. It's a game with some adult themes. Nothing racy, but just some scary stuff.
That said, we've got some awful ports in the App Store before, and I could barely play this game dual booted into Windows on my Mac because of performance issues. So the fact that they got it working as well as it did on iOS, the touch controls work pretty well. It supports the controllers. It's got icon. It's got all the things you should have as a port. But I was just kind of impressed that it worked on the device at all.
Yeah, kind of impressive,
honest.
actually. Like a very technically impressive port. Also, they describe it. So Apple, when they release their the results of these awards, each one gets a sort of a blurb from Apple, and you can kind of tell from each blurb like what about the game made Apple interested in it. And here they pretty much just said redesigned and optimized for iOS and tvOS, which doesn't say much, but what I guess it does say is that like they really put a lot of effort into making sure that this game didn't feel like a clunky port. They gave it really good touch controls, and redesigned in that I think they actually reworked a few of the puzzles a little bit to make it more natural on iOS. It's also on tvOS, and who's publishing big games on tvOS these days? Probably this was the biggest tvOS game port of the year. So probably worth highlighting from Apple's perspective just for that reason. So it's a really accomplished port.
For those who are curious what the touch controls actually are, you can play it with one finger.
Jesus. Yeah, I was just trying it out. Sorry. Got freaked out, got abducted by somebody. Jesus. What is this game?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So enjoy the game, run past people trying to hit you with a car. It throws you right in. But
I want to sell people on Inside a little bit. First, if you want to deep dive on it, go back and listen to our episode on it. It was episode 94 of the short game, and it's one of my favorite games that we've covered.
Yeah, agreed.
It's if you've played their previous game, Limbo, you know what to expect for the first 2/3 of the game, more or less. It's more interesting, more well done than that previous game, Limbo, but it is a sort of a puzzle platformer. And I will not spoil anything here, but I will say that it has the best third act of a video game that I can recall, and my jaw was on the floor the entire time. So this game is 100% worth playing, and particularly the last third or so of the game is astonishing. It's totally worth playing. And if iOS is your best platform to play it on, it seems like this is a good enough port to do. Go for it.
Well, I think it's really notable that the iOS download it's a free to download $7 unlock. So you can actually see if you like the touch controls. You can see if having Inside at the size of your device works for you before you go forward. Mm-hmm. For me, it was really great because I could try the touch controls before recording and actually vouch for the port personally without paying for it again. But I could see people really liking it on the iPad because it is a great put on your headphones immersive time if you want to have a little closer experience than you would. I don't think it is a game that requires a controller like many other ports. So I'm surprised with it winning a design award because it doesn't feel designed for the iOS experience, but they did really make it work. It's not just a straight port. It's not like BioShock, which just didn't work at all.
Yeah, a lot of things, their idea of a port is do the bare minimum to get it running and then put buttons on the screen that you can press. And
yeah, that would have been a tragedy for this game.
Yeah.
Oh, it wouldn't have
Because
worked
you want
at
to
all.
see everything that's going on in this dark, creepy scene.
Yep. I've now played 3 versions of this game, though. Like, I've played the Windows version, I've played it on PS4, and now, not all of it, but I've played some of the game on iOS. And really, there's not a bad platform for it. My preference would be PS4, probably, just because that's like a platform I really like. But if you have an iOS device, it's free to get started with this game. You can play, I think it's the first whole, chapter or something. So, awesome. The next game that won this year was another that I love, but is also not a huge surprise. Alto's Odyssey. Alto's Odyssey is the sequel to Alto's Adventure. We've talked about Alto's Adventure and also Alto's Odyssey on this show probably innumerable times. First with me bragging about my score on Alto's Adventure, and then later with me
staying suspiciously quiet about your score.
yeah. Whereas Laura has annihilated me at Alto's Odyssey.
What have you gotten? Yeah.
I'm over 500,000 points up on you.
Oh my god.
Wow. Oh.
Like that's what you mean by annihilated.
Yeah. It's really
That's
bad, guys. I can't handle it. It's really bad.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot. It's a lot more points.
So Alto's Odyssey is a snowboarding game, or in this case, it is the setting has moved to deserts. Yes, so sandboarding.
Because that's a thing that people do, sandboarding.
Oh, absolutely.
Or is it? I don't know anything, but I don't think sandboarding.
Sports.
I think it's
sports
this game
things.
is sort of or like this game and its prequel or predecessor are like the perfect example of the endless runner. They've really essentially perfected these games. We've talked about them on the show. I'll have links in the show notes to past episodes where we've discussed the Alto games as well as endless runners generally, but they are, I think, like such polished, wonderful. If you've ever enjoyed playing an endless runner type of game, this is, I think, as good as those get.
It's also, I think, a perfect example of a sequel. It's sometimes video game sequels are hard to nail, and this one seemed to sort of take the approach of, okay, what works about the first game? All of the movement, the characters, the tricks, everything like that, all that works. Okay, keep all of that exactly as it is. What gets a little stale in the first game? The areas, the pattern of the landmarks and things like that. Okay, well, let's replace it with something that's more fun and better. Where can we scale up and do better? Graphics. Okay, we can make the graphics more and more amazing. It can look really pretty, and to highlight that, we can give people a photo mode. Done, shipped. It's beautiful.
I still like looking back at the Apple notes on these and trying to figure out like what were they trying to say by making this award. And
Other than sorry for not giving you it the first time around.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's actually probably the biggest thing that this award in particular says is that, like, sorry we didn't give an award to Alto's Adventure. I don't know what else got awards that year, but
it was Vainglory, Does Not Commute, and Crossy Road, which were
Okay.
actually all solid picks. I think they had more student awards that
wasn't
year.
Vainglory a MOBA? I don't remember Vainglory. Yeah, no, I that's one where it's like, I don't know.
MOBAs were really hot that
Nobody
year.
talks about
and
Vainglory
Shadowmatic
anymore.
because it was a 3D rotating
Yeah.
game. It was much more design and not so much games. I mean, I think it did win Game of the Year that year.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like it's easy to understand why they wouldn't have given an award to it, because while it was a beautiful game and also an iOS exclusive at the time, it was an endless runner, and iOS was awash in endless runners at the time.
Yeah.
And so it probably didn't stand out in the crowd to, your average Apple, whoever it is that gives out these awards. But yeah, this seems sort of like an apology for not giving an award to that. Like it's the Academy Award for the lesser film to the great director kind of thing. But they note in this one the reasons that they gave it this award: touch and haptics and metal optimized art. So first of all, touch and haptics, yes, this has great touch controls, so did the original. It has great haptics, which is something that the original optimized about halfway through its sort of life as a game, because haptics didn't exist when the original Alto's Adventure came out. But this does haptics really, really well. But I'm really puzzled by the phrase metal optimized art. Like, yes, it's using metal to do its graphics, but it's not like generating these. These are hand-drawn graphics or hand-created.
I interpreted that as a lot of the there's a lot more layers. There are birds, there are background elements, there's a lot more weather patterns. They have a lot more layers to the background than that I think is what they're, it's that the richness of the depth, I think, is what the metal optimized art is, because it's,
Yeah.
you're going through multiple landscapes. And so each landscape has its own thing. I'm guessing that is, it's the complexity of the procedurally generated art that they're awarding it to.
Yeah, I'm interested there though, because like some of the other things we'll be talking about. The next game on our list is Frost. That game is metal native art. Like that is art that is entirely generated with computation, whereas this is, I think, mostly hand illustrated. So yes, they're definitely using metal to make that as smooth and fluid, as possible. But I just think it's an interesting way of putting it. They're really, I feel like, kind of. It felt to me a little bit like they were stretching, like, hey, this game uses metal. Look how nice it looks. When really what they should be praising is these guys did a great job drawing this stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
But then it wouldn't be an Apple Design Award. It would just be a design award.
True.
It very much just feels like a big refinement on the original to me, which I think is good, because the original was, I think, one of the best iOS games, just for like games for the iPhone, that really like is really great to play, like quick to pick up, really fun, and definitely, like as you said, like the kind of ideal endless runner. I think it's something where and definitely like adds new modes and types of gameplay that are like make it a little more fresh. So I definitely was excited to have this update to it.
Yeah. And I continue to play this more than any other game on my iPhone since Alto's Adventure came out. Like I've logged a lot of hours on Alto, less on Odyssey, just I think because I kind of conquered that world with Alto's Adventure, and now the new game has brought me back into it, but it's at a little bit of a slower pace, which is how I explain my lower score than Laura's. That's my excuse, but it's a great game, and if you love that sort of game, it just sort of feels like this is an iOS ass game. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So the next game on the list, it was new to me. I had not heard of this until the awards came out, which is probably my fault, because it is from the developer of a past game that got a good amount of buzz. That's Frost by Kunabi Brother, which is the name of the development studio that created Bleck. We covered Bleck on a previous Design Awards episode.
Continuing the theme of repeat winners.
Yeah.
So this was a game that I really enjoyed. It was a fast play. I like you, I had not heard of it. But after downloading it and booting it up, I was able to, beat it in pretty much one afternoon. It's a series of puzzles that maybe puzzles is a little bit wrong to describe exactly what you're doing. There's, it's what it reminds me most of is those sandbox toy type games where, what you're really dealing with is a particle system that, has particles of different kinds, and you can touch and swipe on screen to cause them to flow and swirl and move around in different ways. I don't know if anybody played any of those games where it's like a sandbox where there's like sand pouring in and you're trying to direct it. It really reminded me of that.
Yeah.
It was super clear why Apple selected it, because I've played a lot of games on iOS, and I've played games on other platforms as well. I've never played a game that had this elaborate of a swirly particle system, because all the graphics are just pure particle effects swirling around.
Little points of light kind of flocking together or sort of flowing around. And I like the way that you manipulate them, because when you sort of draw paths on the screen, which kind of create currents, that some of the particles will flow through and others won't. So the different colors of particles behave differently, and it's really nice. It has a kind of a fun flow to it.
I was very impressed by the use of color, because we've seen a lot of these games that are kind of a dark color scheme and then a really bright neon. Limelight, for example, a lot of games that have this really high contrast look to them. And what I appreciated the most was the currents are just a slightly darker shade. You already think, it's almost a black background, but somehow the current is darker. There's like they do really subtle changes of color to help you know what's going on. It didn't take me long to do any of these puzzles. It's a couple, 30 seconds, you can clear things, but it's very clear where your currents are, where things are flowing and how things are behaving without it ever having to break from a very monocolor palette. Like there's that dark background and then there's these bright color streams and there's these circles and that's all you have really. It's really hard to do that without having to hint at people. Like those currents must have taken a long time to get right. And they do. It's clear.
And there's no tutorialization or anything in this. It's wordless from start to finish. It's like a really nice example of that sort of very simple. Limelight is a great point of comparison. By the way, we've covered Limelight on this show before. Limelight was great and has an iOS port now since the last time we talked about it. Actually, I don't think the iOS port was out when we covered it. Was it?
We did not, and it is better on iOS than it is on laptop.
Yeah, that game is so good.
It feels like it should have been an iOS release from the start.
I mean, if they were giving out awards for ports,
if it had started on iOS, it would have won a design award.
Yeah, beautiful.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, but Frost did kind of remind me of that, and in a good way. It's a little shorter than Limelight, but
it's just 55 levels.
Yeah, so and each level is really short. I got stuck on a few, but I never spent more than say 5 minutes on one.
Yeah.
So beautiful little game. I do think it's kind of funny. The press kit for the game kind of felt like it was fishing for an Apple Design Awards. Like the text that, as part of their announcement, it's also, I think, in their description on the App Store, feels very much like, hello, Apple, Apple PR. We would love to be featured on the App Store and perhaps given an award, please. We
did hard things with metal. Please give us awards.
Yeah, I mean, not to take anything away from Kunabi Brother, who are clearly doing great work here and creating something that was really, really fun to play. But like,
of their 3 games, 2 are ADA winners and 1 has been an editor's choice on the App Store.
Yeah, so like I think they have a
They know how to do.
They know what they're doing.
They know how to play that game. And so their text said something like, here, I've got the quote. So it's, currently no CPU in any consumer device provides the performance needed for calculating the complex swarming behaviors that you can experience in Frost. By utilizing the iOS GPU technology Metal to the fullest, we multiplied the computing power and made possible the real-time simulation of swarms and flocks consisting of thousands of individuals on an iPhone or iPad. I mean, like, it almost feels like that's something that they would, like, fax to their developer relations guy and be like, hey, could you maybe pass this on to the ADA picking team?
It is a truly impressive use of particles.
Hey, great particles.
I've never seen such incredible flocking behavior
on a consumer device.
Or on any of my many non-consumer pro devices, such as my Cray supercomputer, which I use exclusively to play flocking simulations.
Hey, I mean, I've seen this listed in 2 categories. People who are like, this is an excellent meditation app because of the pretty colors and the pretty music. Like, people have talked about this as kind of a meditation thing, and other people have talked about it as a tech demo. And there are people who want a really pretty game to show off their phone, and other people just want a Zen chill experience. Yeah. And that's the only 2 people I've really, like, those 2 categories of folks love this game.
Yeah.
Meditative tech demo pretending to be a puzzle game.
I mean, like, the short game is not necessarily in the meditative tech demo demographic, so it's not surprising we haven't covered this game.
It's good for meditating like a VC.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really pretty fun. Having like simple puzzles, and they are really pretty, and it definitely is having like played around with other like Shane was mentioning, like sand box things, like just being able to like what it can do with all the particle simulation actually is really impressive, and just like it is kind of just pretty to look at. So yeah. I had fun with it.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. And I think if you are the sort of person who likes these sort of very polished, sort of wordless, simplistic puzzles, this is one of the better ones on iOS. You know, we've covered a number of things that sort of fall into, I guess, this sort of genre or whatever before, but this is one of the better ones on iOS. And it's also an example of a sort of a dwindling, I guess, area of iOS development, which is developing a full-priced, pay-once iOS game. You know, and all of these are, actually. You know, there's not a single one of these on here that is a like in-app purchase based thing, with the sort of exception.
Sort of inside, but not really.
Yeah,
it's not an in-app purchase.
Yeah, it's more of like the demo kind of thing, which is, I think, still just fine by me. So it's nice. It's nice to see that Apple has continued to sort of put their weight behind games that are using that model. Sort of, I think of it as sort of the classic model of selling an iOS game, and not the sort of more popular these days model of a game that is primarily based around like gachapon mechanics and in-app purchases and in-app currencies, et cetera, et cetera.
And I will say every port should do the high price, free to download high price thing, because it is so hard to know if ports are any good. And the Playdead developers trusted that it was good enough to make people say $7 after they played the start. But so many times ports just fail instantly. So I am totally cool with an app purchase in that situation.
Yeah, same here.
If I'm not mistaken, I mean, this is a little off topic, but if I'm not mistaken, there was some things announced at WWDC this year. They'll make it easier, more seamless for devs to do sort of that trial style development where you have a kind of a free download that you then convert to the full version.
What they did is they're officially sanctioning and making it possible to do as a $0 in-app purchase, like a 2-week trial, basically, so that you can have something that is. There are a lot of problems with it. For things like doesn't allow you to buy these for. It doesn't work well for having volume purchases for like productivity stuff. Mainly would be the problem, or family sharing in-app purchases aren't shared between those, things like that, where it's it doesn't work, and it doesn't show. It shows it as it's a free app, and it might have like a $50 in-app purchase, where it's just like to actually have it work. So it's not without flaws, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I've never really understood why that's been something that Apple has dragged their heels on so much, particularly when essentially, like, you could already kind of get around it with things like what Playdead is doing with Inside, by making the full game or full app an in-app purchase. I think it's, I guess, just that they didn't really have a way to do timed trials. Like, here's the full thing for X amount of time for free, and then you have to pay to get it for the rest of time or something. I don't know.
The rationale, I think, behind it is they didn't want to have. I think Playdead's approach is something that was always kind of sanctioned, but they didn't want to have apps where you would download it and it just didn't do anything, where you had to pay money to then unlock it. And I think that was a problem. So it's something where they're finding a way to work around that now.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see that happening anyway. Hopefully that'll make its way to games, and in ways that'll, be useful to people. 'Cause, for example, if you make a multiplayer focused game, Playdead's model here would not work. You wouldn't be able to say, here you can play 10 matches for free, and then you have to pay. It would be, you have to unlock the full game with an in-app purchase, and that doesn't work so well if your game is oriented around multiplayer or something like that. So hopefully that'll open things up for more types of trials and demos on the App Store. I guess the last game on our list was the biggest surprise for me out of these, because it's wild how little time there was between the game's release and it winning an Apple Design Award. Oddmar came out April 19th of 2018. And then it won an Apple Design Award in June. So
it is not surprising when you know that the studio worked on this for 4 years and had tons of demos. So like, I guarantee, like, the second, like, the pedigree alone, I was like, it's going to win unless it completely blows.
Yeah.
So it is weird, but like if you follow iOS gaming really heavily, like they've been talking about this game for literally 4 years.
That's true, yeah, and it's also the same developers that did Leo's Fortune, which we've covered on this show before, and I think also previously won an Apple Design Award.
This was like, we're going to do a Viking game next, and then 4 years of silence.
Well, so what did you guys think of it? Because like my first impressions of it were not good, and then I came to like it quite a bit. So I don't know, what did you guys think of it if you played it?
I've only played enough to try playing the first boss, the big troll. What it honestly, the look of it, the cartoony art, and the cutscenes and the narration and all of it, I think has an incredible level of polish. So it's definitely worthy of the kind of Apple Design Award. It doesn't wow me with like incredible platforming innovations so much. Like I don't feel like it's a platformer that like breaks the mold, but what it is it's an extremely refined example of the platformer genre. It really reminds me of the Rayman.
That was going to be my comparison as well. It reminds me a lot of that. It's so it put me off at first, and this is partly probably my problems and not the game's. The art style is incredibly detailed, beautifully illustrated, and doesn't look good to me. Like it's beautiful or like extremely well executed, and it's this sort of like, I don't know, it's this style of like illustration of like cutesy but slightly gross looking Viking dude that, I don't know, it just didn't do anything for me on an artistic level. I just thought like, I don't like how this looks.
It's a little 2D plus for people trying to narrow it down, where it is 2D art style, but there is shading. And
a lot of shading. A lot of like
there's
highlights.
A lot of shading. And for some people, it's like, it feels too much like old Flash games. I mean, this is so much higher quality than that. But for some people, it like ticks that internal brain. Rayman has the same kind of thing going on in many ways. So
yeah, also it has a lot of cutscenes, which when I'm trying to check something out like this for the show, like opening the cutesy Viking platformer, and then before you ever get to jump, you have like well over 10 minutes of narration about a story of a Viking whose village doesn't like him very much because he doesn't do a lot of Viking stuff like going out and, I don't know, pillaging or whatever. He kind of just leeches off all of his friends. And then when they decide that they don't like him anymore and they're about to kick him out of the village, he meets, I guess, like a fairy or something who gives him magic mushrooms that let him do some kind of weird jumping thing. There's a lot of
like grows mushrooms out of his feet, and it lets him jump a lot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like sort of vague drug references in this. In every single level, there's a thing where you find this like weird cloud of smoke that you inhale and go into a dream state, and that there's like a mini level inside. Like there's a lot of sort of like vague drug references.
I'm into it. Right on, bro.
Very clean but vague drug references.
Yeah. It's the
very
dream
Alice
world.
in
He's
Wonderland.
not high. He's asleep. It's I don't know. It's an extraordinarily well executed game that didn't really do much for me. It grew on me a little bit as it went, but like particularly at the start, it's these incredibly linear platforming levels where like the touch controls are phenomenal. It's got absolutely great touch controls. If you played Leo's Fortune, this is like this, but a little less floaty, and you have a sword. Like it's really great touch controls for a platformer. So playing it is objectively fun, but the level design is like a whole lot of hallways with, I mean, maybe this gets a little better. I only played about an hour and a half, so just up to the first boss, really. And I understand maybe I'm not doing it, the really giving it full credit here. But the level design was beautiful, but ultimately kind of boring for me. And so for platformers, like if it's not building interesting challenges for me, like, I don't know, like it's this guy just, it's just jumping. Like I don't know. I think it's a gorgeous game. And if you like platformers on iOS, this is still probably one of the best ones out there. And it's probably worth checking out, because this might be my personal issues with it. It's gotten amazing reviews. Like Touch Arcade.
I will say it does get spike. It does after like level 3-ish get a lot harder, which I think, not a lot, but I think you're right. Like this has been a game people have been fawning over because you don't get this polish on iOS anymore.
Yeah.
Like you don't get a platformer this good. It would go straight to Switch. And it would cost 3 times as much. People would gladly pay $15 for it. So like people are falling over themselves because like this quality of game just, it feels like a throwback.
Yeah, I wonder why they decided to launch this on iOS for $5 when they probably could have launched the game in fundamentally the exact same form on a different platform. I mean, this doesn't say anything nice or good about iOS as a platform for games these days, but like they could have launched this game for 3 times as much on Switch, sold half as many copies and made more money, and then later brought it to iOS and they would have made more money. I'm kind of surprised they decided to launch it as they did. They must just be they must really just love iOS, which is great.
Well, they had designed it, again, they've been working on this game for 4 years, so they probably had been like, it's always an iOS game. Switch came out relatively recently. They were probably almost done with the game.
Yeah, true.
But still, I would have been like, cool, hold on to it, extend a couple more months, do the Switch port, and by the time you go on mobile, you'll make a ton of money. That said, they got much more attention launching on iOS than they would have on Switch.
Yeah, they definitely got a lot of attention from the various outlets that cover iOS games. And like I mentioned, Touch Arcade's review of it was effusive. They loved this game. I don't always agree with their takes, but like they definitely had some good points. It's a really, really good game from pretty much every perspective. I think something about its level design didn't quite work for me, but I can't say that's going to be the case for most people. It seems like I'm sort of in the minority there. People love this game. So if you take a look at the trailer for it on the App Store and it looks like it'd be fun to you, it probably will be. Give it a try. It's a really neat game, and I definitely see why it won an ADA, even though the team that picks the awards, whoever it is in Apple PR or whatever, probably didn't have that long with it. I wonder if they had an advanced copy.
They might have. I will say that fun fact from one of the articles about it, they were praising that there's like an hour and a half of original music in this game. And apparently the composition uses the nyckelharpa, an archaic 15th century Swedish instrument with resonators, strings, and wooden keys. So...
Okay.
So that's
that's
extra.
up my alley.
All the nickel harpa groupies are definitely downloading it now.
Gotta play it for the nickel harpa.
Of course.
So obviously the Apple Design Awards aren't exclusively about games. Other stuff won as well. We don't really have time to talk about them. I will just mention them briefly so that if they sound like they might be interesting to you. By the way, if you go in the Apple App Store on your iPhone or iPad and do a search for Apple Design Awards, there's a little feature article that lists all of these, gives links to download all of them. But Agenda won. It's a sort of a note-taking calendar app. It sounds neat. Not really in the market for one, so I haven't tried it personally. It sounds pretty cool. Bandanimal, which is a music creation toy for kids that toy is probably the wrong word for it, but it's an app that has toy-like functions and lets kids create music using cute animal illustrations. Looks really cute. Reminds me a little bit of some of the Tokaboka stuff that I've seen. But a kind of
might try it on my baby.
Style. Yeah, maybe give it a try. Calzi 3, which looks like some kind of advanced calculator that has features that I don't understand. And iTranslate Converse. I think this probably won because it's got an actually useful Apple Watch app. This is a two-way conversation translator app that you can use on your phone or watch that apparently will recognize people's voices and translate in real time and let you carry on a conversation. I may give this a try on my upcoming trip to Italy this September. And then the final thing that won was Triton Sponge. I think I mentioned this earlier. The app that will let you
blood measuring app.
take photos of rags and sponges in a hospital operating room and estimate the blood loss of a patient using machine learning and like image recognition, which sounds amazing, but also not the kind of thing that I could imagine anybody like rushing out to download unless if this is an app for you, you already know about it.
Yeah, this is something where it's like
Health kit.
Yeah, it's like this is. I love it, and also I really hate it. like it seems like a great medical tool, but I also like hate thinking about using this. Just like, great. I really needed to know just how much was held in these blood rags that I have lying around.
I know, crazy, but really an interesting thing. You know, you can see why Apple would
Great
award
app
something
for vampires.
Like that. Yes. So, as we've been doing for the last several episodes, we're going to close things out by talking about what's been making us happy this week. So, Mark, what's been making you happy this week?
I've really been enjoying a new album from Nico Case called Hell On is the album. And it's her first album in something like 5 years. But I've really been enjoying that, and yeah, that's just been really fun to have a new album from an artist that I really like. I think some of the ones that were released as singles, Hell On, Curse of the I-5 Corridor, and Bad Luck are all pretty fun. So Bad Luck especially. So I really recommend listening to that.
I've seen that pop up on my Spotify, and I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and listen to it yet. When a new album comes out from an artist that, you know, that hasn't put out an album in a while, but I know I really like, I always sort of want to make time to sit down and like listen to the whole thing in one go. Haven't had a chance to do that with this yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
I did that recently with the new Ockerville River album. And
it's good.
I don't know what it is. I don't know what I was expecting when I sat down to listen to a song called Famous Tracheotomies, but it wasn't a listing of celebrity tracheotomies, which that song basically is just a catalog of various celebrities who've had tracheotomies and the effect that it had on their lives.
And careers. Yes, it's a wonderful song. Definitely give that a listen if you... I loved that album. It was so good. I just saw them live 2 days ago. They're fantastic.
Jealous.
So Shane, what's making you happy this week?
Well, I gotta say... it is super, super hot in Houston right now. Just uncomfortably, horribly hot. Made worse by the fact that I'm podcasting and here in my office, when I record, I have to turn off the air conditioning. Otherwise it comes through loud and clear on my microphone.
Yeah, I'm sorry to do that to you, Shane.
So the thing that has been making me happiest has been going down to a spot near my house called the Truck Yard and getting their frozen cocktails. And they have just I've not been to this place before, but it's really family friendly. So I can bring my baby and just sort of like plop him down, and he finds lots of people to like bother other than me.
He loves the frozen cocktails too.
He does not love the frozen cocktails, but he does love crawling around while I drink key lime pie flavored tequila cocktails and frozen trash can punch cocktails and all sorts of delicious frozen, sweet, wonderful things. And they also have food trucks. There's a food truck pavilion there. So what is getting me through this week has been frozen cocktails helping me beat the heat.
All right. Laura, what has been making you happy this week?
Mine's also food related. I found a very simple carnitas recipe that's just it's just pork shoulder, water, and salt. And you just kind of cook it on the stove. You cook it on the stove for a while, and then all of the fat in the pork shoulder goes into the water, and then all the water evaporates, and then it just fries. And then you don't do anything. Like, it's one pot, like hour and a half, the water goes away, and then you just fry it for an hour and 10 minutes, and then suddenly you have magical, beautiful, perfect carnitas with no seasoning. It is the laziest thing in the world. Apparently this recipe's been online for a while, and like the people who follow food blogs are like, oh, it's the famous Diane Kennedy Food 52 carnitas. And I was like, I don't care. Like, I just didn't have any, like, I did kind of a spice rapture where I like, threw out all the out of date spices. I was like, oh shit, I have nothing left. And I purchased a hunk of meat. It was gonna go bad, and I was like, carnitas recipe, no seasoning. And they were like, of course, why don't you use the master recipe? I've already given it to 2 people. It made perfect meat, and I didn't have to do anything to it.
God, I love carnitas. You need to send me that recipe. If possible, I'll put a link to it in the show notes so that everyone can enjoy the carnitas.
Yeah, it's called like put water in a pot and like cook it.
I kind of expected it to be much more difficult than that, so that's very good to hear.
I thought it was going to be super hard. I don't have a grill. So we've just been having breakfast tacos and then carnitas for several days. Nobody is complaining.
Nice. Well, what's making me happy this week was yesterday we got out to the theater. Jamie and I are big horror movie fans. And so we try to go out to any sort of big name horror movie that comes out in theaters. And the biggest one right now that is got a lot of buzz after, I think, Cannes. I think it premiered at Cannes Film Festival, was Hereditary. It's a weird case of a mismatch between a film and its audience, I think, because Hereditary was a great horror movie, but it's also a very difficult film. It's a very challenging film, I have to say. Like, steel yourself before you go to watch it, and not just because it's scary. A lot of people are saying, oh, this is the scariest movie of the last whatever. I think people who are saying this is the scariest horror film of the last decade or whatever are just people who have not really been connected with horror films for the last decade and suddenly watched this movie. It's a scary-ish movie, but really it's more deeply distressing and disturbing for reasons that are different from your typical, like, this is not a Paranormal Activity or whatever. But nobody told that to the kids in the audience at the showing that I went to. There were a bunch of teens who had clearly gone there with their teen dates and were watching this movie that I can say that I could mostly compare to being like a much more disturbing Babadook. Like, not the kind of
parenthood, right?
Themes of parenthood, family distress, horrible things happening to children. It's a truly distressing movie. A really, really good horror movie that I'll probably be thinking about and talking about for a while, and I won't spoil anything. If you can, see it without seeing the trailer. There's some stuff in the trailer that I thought was a little bit spoilery, although it's mostly misdirection. But it's a great movie. I highly recommend. I can't say that it's making me happy this week, but it's making me distressed, and it's making me think. And so I highly recommend the movie Hereditary. If you can see it in theaters, do, because it's the kind of movie that if I hadn't seen it in theaters, I probably would have turned it off halfway through from being so distressed by it. And I'm really glad I made it through to the end, which was really, really interesting ending. So that's what's making me sort of happy this week. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. This is our 5th Apple Design Awards episode. We have been covering the Apple Design Awards as a podcast since 2014. Can you believe it? So thank you for joining us on this one. If you like our coverage of this, we've got a back catalog of episodes you can go back and check out. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here.
It's so exciting to finally get the originator of the person in lotus position emoji, the emoji father himself, coming onto the show. If our listeners haven't checked out Mark's podcast, please do. And the place to start would be the amazing series on sort of the whole process of how emojis come to be. I'll try to have a link to that in the show notes. It's the best. Your show just concluded in February, right? Or the most recent season of it.
The 3rd season ended in February, and working on some more stuff. Not sure when it'll be out, but there's more episodes to come.
That's great to hear. Yeah, it's the kind of show that, like, if you have people in your life who don't like it when you put on a tech show, This is the kind of show that you can listen to together. It tells
Yeah.
stories. It's incredibly well produced. It's a really impressive show. So I 100% recommend it. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Mark. So if you want to find our show on the internet, you can find us at www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find our contact form. And also you can find us on Twitter @_shortgame. You can find me on Twitter @RayganK. That's RayGanK. Mark, apart from your podcast itself, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter @MC Bramhill. Then that's probably the best place for people to go.
Yeah. And Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @LauraJNash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
On Twitter @8bitshane.
And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.